the Enterprise Digital Podcast with Ian Aitchison and Barclay Ray, navigating the ever-expanding service management maze.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Enterprise Digital Podcast. This is the first one that we have recorded in 2026. You may have heard some of our ditties from 25. Happy New Year, or happy whatever way that you measure time, put it that way. I am still Barclay Ray and I'm still accompanied by Ian Aitchison. We can't seem to change that in any way. It just seems to keep happening the same way. Ian, how are you doing these days?
I would say great, but today I'm just a tiny bit under the weather. You may hear my voice is a tiny bit crackly. I may be a little quieter than usual. I'm just battling some small passing illness, but other than that, generally good. Thank you.
Well, hopefully you can shake that off. And we've got a really interesting topic and a great guest today. Before we do all that, and it's traditional, it's something we've been doing for years. No idea why, but we do it anyway. And usually you bring in some trivia.
I do.
And this may be something of interest. It may not, but let's hear it anyway. What have we got today?
So I'm referring to my giant screen of trivia, which is a constant stream running in front of me. I can give you a choice of 3 amazing pieces of trivia. Do you want some good IT employment news? Do you want to hear about a newly discovered fungus? Or would you like to hear about chocolate honey? Or would you like all 3?
I don't think I want another fungus. And I think we've had fungus for, we've had all sorts.
We have done that, and that involves spiders as well. So let's not do the fungus and the spiders.
Let's have the good employment news and then the chocolate and honey. That sounds
okay. They're both quite short bits of trivia. So first, just recently, I was very pleased to see some news that came out where recruitment firm Robert Harp recently identified growing demand for tech IT workers as we go into 2026. And this has been backed up by some other reports, both in the growth of the IT industry and particularly around fintech, finance technology in the city as well is booming. But just generally, they're saying increased demand for IT professionals. 56% of organizations in their survey plan to expand their permanent IT and technology teams in the first half of this year. Accelerating digital transformation, embedding AI, upgrading legacy systems. Oh, we love that. And of course, strengthening cyber resilience. So there's a lot of bad news at the moment going around. It's quite nice to hear some positive industry news. It looks like the IT department continues to be pivotal to the success of every business and continues to be hiring based on that and other recent surveys, which is good.
And there's good news. I think we said one of the recent ones that I'd certainly heard from recruiters that they were finding it quite tough, but that's good to hear. We know that there's money out there, don't we? I mean, it's just how it's used. So it's a question of when people feel confident about making decisions and getting out there. So that's good news. Good.
Sweetener as well, because I said I'd try and cover 2. So the other one you chose was about honey. And this is just another one of those great little biology science announcements that came out in the last week. A byproduct of making chocolate are the shells, the sort of outside shell of cocoa bean shells. It's a waste product, and it's actually quite wasteful because there's a lot of chocolate that's made. Recently, scientists have discovered how to use and reuse those cocoa bean shells by mixing them in a particularly clever way that I won't describe because it's too complicated for me to understand, but in a very clever way, which takes all of the good stuff out of the cocoa bean shells and mixes it beautifully with the honey and makes a new type of honey, basically chocolate honey, which apparently has many good contents in it, but is particularly good for the skin. So chocolate honey will give us beautiful skin in the very near future. That's a great start.
This is slightly disconcerting because it's 2 bits of good news that doesn't involve anything kind of slightly squeamish.
Indeed.
Normally what you do, all the things about fungus and growing brain.
Years.
That's great. I'm delighted. That's a very positive story. Shall we bring in our guest and get talking on the subject? Because
I think we certainly should. So let's move on to much more important matters than my trivia. Let's introduce our guest. I'd like to welcome to the stage. Here's Faith Thomas. Hi, Faith.
Hi.
Hi, Faith. Really nice for you, of you to join us and to have a discussion with us today. You are at Birmingham University and really involved in the higher education industry discussions with UCISA and so on. But can you just give us a quick sketch of, what it is, how you got to that particular role and things that you've done to get there, for those that haven't met you at conferences, like the rest of us might have bumped into you occasionally over the years?
Yeah, so I'm one of two lead IT Service Management Practitioners for the University of Birmingham. We've got a small team on service management, and we deal with the main practices such as instant problem, change, release, that sort of thing. Personally, I've been working in IT for over 20 years, 25 years actually, and IT service management for over 20 years. Mainly when I started working in IT service management, because I was on the service desk first, I was working for problem management and change management, in my specialty being being a problem child. Yeah, so I worked for Birmingham City Council, Birmingham's other main employer, before the bankruptcy. Now I work for University of Birmingham. I've been there for 8 years this year, I believe. So yeah, it's been great. They're a wonderful place to work. And yeah, before, as well as that, I'm now on the UCISA committee for the support services group. So there's a reason helping out with their kind of the web stuff that we provide, and the conference that we have in June, July. So
Just for those listening or watching, UCISA,
It's basically the membership organization for university organizations and support people. So people who, not necessarily the academics, although there are some academic, but there's the sort of IT group, support services, there's a management strategic layer. So I think you've been involved with it for years, and it's been a really good place to see how organizations can really collaborate in a way that many corporations don't. People in that group, they meet and they share stuff, and it's great. It's similar to EDUCAUSE in the US, which is a bigger organization, but same kind of thing.
yeah.
And I've been at the conference quite a few times over the years, and it always seems to be, they've always got some new way of presenting stuff, and there's always new ideas for how we discuss things and workshops, and really sort of innovative conference, I've always found.
sounds great.
And sorry, we interrupted you there when you were talking about that. So what are you going to be doing with UCISA, Faith?
Yeah, so working with the support services group, I'm going to be initially involved in helping to arrange the next conference, which is in June, the end of June this year. And yeah, that's going to be in Leeds. So our theme is about kind of doing more with less. So there's some really interesting talks been submitted so far. We're open for submissions to talk at the moment. And yeah, it's shaping up to be pretty interesting, to be honest.
Doing more with less is a kind of perennial topic for the IT industry as a whole. I mean, it's always a really good one. I mean, that's always a lead into innovation and a lead into new ways of doing things, because you've got to find new ways to do things. So sounds really great.
The thing that I've found is that there's some of the trends that have come through lately in the wider industry, like walk-in or physical service desks, where you actually have a genius bar or a place to go. What many organizations now have, they never went away in the university environment. And then you've got various other aspects in terms of things like profiling, for example. There's always been completely separate customer profiles. You've got the academics who have their own being. You've got the rest of the university in terms of admin and support. You've got students who are quite different as well. But before you even start, you've got really quite a diverse group of people that you are
Mhm.
and are expected to deliver stuff to in order to meet their expectations. So I've always found it a really interesting environment, and always nice people and nice environments to work in as well. Cool.
Yeah, they're a really good bunch. And just working in universities, it's a unique situation. Universities do things differently than other things. And obviously, I've worked in the local government sector before. So there's stuff that kind of not for profit type thing, but the private sector and that sort of thing. But it's a different way. It's a lot more hearts and minds. It's not about making the profit, which you can get in a lot of other industries. So it's really exciting and interesting to find new ways to do things that work for university.
Great. So we've got you introduced. We're going to talk today about a particular area of interest for you, which is neurodiversity in the workplace. And that's a very relevant topic discussed a lot at the moment. There's lots of conference sessions. I believe you've delivered some presentations on that at recent events, yeah?
So recently, in November, I did a talk at the ITSM 25 conference, and also did one at eCiser in July last year. And it was about how neurodiversity can be an advantage and work really well with agile service management. So on our journey with our department, we introduced agile practices working with our service management practices and kind of combined the both to make it work really well. And then we noticed that through my diagnosis and noticed how a lot of the techniques and things that we started trying to implement actually helped a lot to manage the nuances of neurodiversity. So my talk was very much on explaining different values and that we have in our team and how they can be an advantage for neurodiversity and how neurodiversity can be an advantage for service management and IT in general. I think the industry as a whole has a lot of neurodiverse people that work in the industry.
I think that's true. I think we've come to realize that over the years. So it's a great topic. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Let's welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. And before we have that conversation, let's stop for an Empire biscuit and a glass of lime cordial. Right, that was refreshing. I'm ready to go now. I'm really interested to hear. Faith, could we start with your journey on this? Because I know that you've come to this quite recently and have been through that process yourself. In your words, what has that been like for you? What happened? Right? How did you get into that situation? We don't need to spend too long on it, but it'd just be good to know how you've gone through that and what it's actually meant from your perspective.
So I have 4 boys of various ages. My eldest is 25 now. When he was 13, he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. It was a really long process with him and a struggle. But over the years, as he's grown and developed and stuff, and he's done really, really well, I've kind of seen similar traits in myself, and I put it off until about 18 months ago. I kind of went, no, I think I need to actually see if I can get a diagnosis because I have very similar traits to him on the ADHD side. So I started diagnosis through the NHS, through the referral to the private sector, because they're so overwhelmed at the moment with people looking for diagnosis. And yeah, it took about a year, a lot of forms for that sort of thing. And then an assessment, a video assessment as well with the psychologist. And last September, I finally got a diagnosis of ADHD. So yeah, that's my personal journey into it.
People say it's a big relief to get a diagnosis. It's like a weight off their shoulders. Did you find that it was receiving them was kind of validating or gratifying?
That kind of time when you're going through the diagnosis, when you're worried that maybe I'm just making it all up, maybe I'm just really rubbish at a lot of stuff. And a lot of people were like, oh, thank God I was actually right about it. I've had people there's somebody that I follow who has autism and just got his diagnosis. And he said that he felt beforehand that he just wasn't a very nice person. And obviously he had autism, and that his certain traits that he thought were negative were, that he was worried about that. So yeah, I think there's that. And I know that there's a lot of people I've talked to who suspect they have autism, ADHD, or any other neurodiversities who've kind of gone, I'm not going to go down the route of getting a diagnosis because it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of pressure to put on myself. And I'm not sure what the label will give me to understand it, especially with my personal view on neurodiversity. I felt it was important to represent the positive side of it, as well as there's a lot of people who are diagnosed at a younger age that are struggling with their neurodiversity tendencies. So I wanted to kind of equal the balance a bit.
Mm. I know there's lots of positives, particularly in the workplace. I think we'll come on to talk about this. Before we do, once you'd had that diagnosis, has it changed anything for you in your working day or your life outside of work, having had that diagnosis? Or is it more just the ability to explain why you see what you see and think what you think?
Yeah, I can recognise my behaviours now. I think sometimes when I'm being a bit more challenging with family life and that sort of thing, not listening, kind of recognising or remembering when things are happening, that sort of thing, I can kind of go, oh, okay, this is my ADHD. And then rather than kind of use it as an excuse, try and find coping mechanisms for those sort of issues and try and improve them. And also with because I have rejection sensitive dysphoria, which makes me feel like everybody hates me and I'm always doing things wrong. It can be quite overwhelming at times. But I do recognise that when I'm getting upset at something that's happened, I'm like, wait a minute, this is just my kind of overreaction.
Yeah, they don't really think that. I'm not really that. This is just, I believe, yeah. And so it makes it easier to manage, I'm sure. Yeah, oh, great. Good.
Has it, I mean, have you just been given the diagnosis, or have you had any follow-up in terms of help or guidance? I mean, just for example, how do you know what, or is there a way that a trigger that helps you to recognize, what did you said that you can see something and recognize it? I mean, do you get any sort of ongoing help, or is that it? You just got the diagnosis and have to live with it?
No, and yeah, it does take a long time after getting the initial diagnosis to then work forwards with the other things. Personally, I've used a lot of self-help as I was going through the process anyway, and advice from people who have neurodiversity online, different websites, that sort of thing as well. And support from the workplace as well. We've got a really good neurodiversity network at the university and that sort of thing. But then there is the option for kind of psychiatry involvement, CBT type things, and also the medication option, which again, though, there's a very long wait list for all of those as well. So it's kind of does feel a bit to begin with, like you've got a diagnosis and off you go. But there is that, it just takes a while longer.
You mentioned the workplace there, and I think as we talk down this direction, something naturally that often comes out is what neurodiversity brings to an individual in the workplace, because it's not necessarily bad things at all, is it? I mean, it can bring, the phrase superpowers is going to come out at some point, and I certainly heard and observed the potential superpowers of people with a neurodiverse diagnosis in the workplace. I mean, tell us a bit about that. What do you see of yourself or others? Is there advantages, benefits, unique skills, as well as challenges in the workplace?
I don't know. Like with neurodiversity, even a specific type of neurodiversity, it's still very much a spectrum. So it does depend on the individual. There's the old saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So that we are all completely different. And I always look on it as, and kind of caveat everything I say with, this is personal to me and my neurodiversities. But I feel that the things that I bring and the people that I know that I talk to who neurodiverse bring a kind of an outside of the box view of situations. We can be quite good at kind of seeing something that other people don't notice as well. Problem solving, that sort of thing. Really, really love a good puzzle. And really, really annoyingly good at working out the twist in films and stuff. And then there's also, with ADHD specifically, there's kind of an empathy thing where, because we've kind of grown with this kind of feeling slightly different than a neurotypical person growing up, and kind of changing our ways to respond to people, there's a lot of skill involved with ADHD. We have quite good sense, sometimes not even realised by ourselves, of kind of the feeling in the room, the empathy side of things. So there's quite a good empathy with people with ADHD. Okay. Yeah, we can normally, it's that kind of sixth sense type thing. We normally work out what's going on in a room when we walk in, and
You mentioned problem solving. I think your role at the University of Birmingham involves problem management.
yeah, right.
So do you think that brings a few advantages there?
Well, I think that kind of, especially in IT, problem management isn't just for the process owners, the designer, the app. It's a lot more for everybody. And I think that a lot of IT support people, that they well, in the problem management side of their job, and designing new ways to work and kind of working out errors and bugs and stuff in systems. So I think it is something that it's not just for people who are doing the service management side of IT. It's for everybody in IT and other industries as well. But yeah, I feel like it is definitely something that can be quite an advantage in that situation.
One thing I was going to ask you, I mean, particularly when you mentioned, people getting diagnosis when they're younger, as kids or teenagers or whatever. What has changed for you? I mean, in terms of whether it's what you do or the way you think or the way you approach things, now that you know, now that you've had this diagnosis, because you had a life before that diagnosis, and then you've, the continuation of that. Well, what's actually different? I mean, if we had this conversation 3 years ago when you hadn't had the diagnosis, in what way do you think you would be different, and that you are different now in terms of the way you do things? Or has it not made any significant difference?
I think that maybe a bit further than 3 years ago, but like in previous parts of my role, in previous roles at the university and previous roles when I was working for the council as well, I think that there were times when I felt like I wasn't doing enough work. I wasn't finishing things, that sort of thing, or that I didn't really know what I was doing. I spent a lot of time kind of going, I don't really know what I did for the last week. And I think that I can see now that there's aspects of the way that I was working and stuff that you kind of go on little tangents, and I'll kind of go through and concentrate really hard on one thing, and then everything else kind of falls behind the wayside. Remember many, many years ago when I was in a kind of data processing job, and my statistics for the team was on the bottom. I was always the lowest. I used to get in trouble with my managers going, "You're not working hard enough," and stuff. I think it was kind of more my neurodiversity was going, "That's really boring work." And I was more concentrating on supporting the other people to actually do their job. And I was helping them with their processing, which meant that even if I was talking most of the time, because I spent a lot of time at the people's desks,
Yeah.
they were getting significantly better for the time that I was spending from them and stuff. And I think that the thing that I'm like, oh, now I can see where that was coming from. It's because the work specifically for that time was something that I didn't enjoy. And I found it more difficult to do that, but I need to kind of adapt to the things that worked for me and that sort of thing. So I think the diagnosis have helped me understand previous behaviours and stuff like that. So yeah, kind of, does that answer the question, I think?
So you've got more kind of, I don't know, awareness or pre-awareness of these things
Yeah.
when they might come up, and so you're less kind of thrown by situations if you recognize that that's the cause of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Just going on to the workplace thing, what have you found then? I mean, I know you're presenting at these events about this. Are there particular things that we should all be looking out for, and what we should be doing differently? For those both maybe who have a diagnosis and those who don't. I don't know what the protocol, I mean, should we always say that people have had a diagnosis, or should they always say, I mean, what's where
Yeah, so
you come to from that about the workplace?
with neurodiversities and with the equality for disability, you don't actually need a diagnosis to declare that you've actually got a neurodiversity or a disability. So that's one thing to really be aware of. There are a lot of people out there that won't have diagnosis but will be neurodivergent. And I think that since getting the diagnosis and stuff, I can see that it really helps for people who are managing other people, not just neurodivergent people, to consider, to learn about and have an awareness of neurodivergencies, and also consider that even the staff that haven't kind of identified with neurodivergencies, if you ask yourself why they're behaving and why they're behaving or doing the things they're doing, sometimes it kind of removes that bias that you can have with people, even if they aren't neurodivergent or they don't know they're neurodivergent, to kind of go, maybe there is something there. Maybe this, maybe we should just consider why that person's doing that. And it doesn't even need to be neurodivergency. You don't know what's going on in people's lives, the way they're behaving and stuff. So I think it really helps with that. There's a big awareness piece that needs to happen with everyone, to understand kind of like how to lead and manage, being aware of these things. It can really help not only the staff, and it can also help with productivity and everything, understanding that and understanding how to get the best from people.
And I'd say that that's a message to people, managers, but it's a message maybe is one of, if you're not receiving training and guidance on how to bring out the best of your team, who may well have a number of people that are neurodivergent, if you're not receiving that guidance and training, you should be asking for it, because it will make you a better manager, right? It'll give you a happier team. If you're not thinking about this, you should be, and your organization should be helping you as a manager to embrace this and make the most of it, take advantage of having such a range of skills and mindsets in the team. If nobody's talking about it, if nobody's thinking about it, that's not right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's more important, especially for when managers, a lot of managers kind of promoted into the role because it's a way of promotion. And a lot of managers get to the point where they haven't had training on how to live successfully and how to lead successfully. But so I think it's really important to have that conversation about getting training to help managing people, help with people for everybody, really, let alone managers of anything, processes, and just staff in general.
There are, I mean, for a lot of the work that I do, auditing and so on, there are majority of good employers that you come across these days do have these programs now for mental health and well-being, and most of them are mandatory, that people do get briefings or some kind of annual, training or education around it. I suppose it's just that making sure that it's not just box ticking, it's not just, washing. And I do believe, as I say, the majority of organizations that are good employ, can't say for the guy in the corner with his dog and his kids, doing whatever they do. But decent sized organizations do take this seriously, and it certainly has moved on significantly over the years. I think still plenty more opportunities for improvement. One thing I was going to ask you that interested me earlier when you were talking about the potential benefits and additional skills or powers that you might have, particularly in engaging with agile and food. Can you just give us a little bit more on that? Because I thought that was quite fascinating, as what you were finding were the things that work better.
So we were at the university on our specific team. There was a big movement towards the kind of buzzwords coming in at the time. We universities, we work a lot slower than the rest of the industry. And everybody started talking about agile and product teams and stuff like that. And it was a little bit scary at the time because we didn't understand agile. And we saw it as this new thing coming in. And then a lot of people were kind of going, oh, you're not going to have to do any process stuff or box check, none of these governance things that service management tries to put in all the time. But we have a really wonderful manager, and he kind of went, we're going to change the narrative of this, and we're going to see if we can learn about Agile and how we can apply it. So we went through kind of a transformational process on our team where we started using Agile practices, kind of a lot of Agile Scrum practices, such as things like sprints, stand-ups in the morning, and like retrospectives to see where we are at the end of the sprint, that sort of thing. As we installed that, we also had at the university product teams being developed for specific products and services. We actually became one of the most successful Agile teams in IT services. And we've had a lot of our kind of things that we've put in place. We've been able to tell our story to the rest of the teams in IT services and wider in the university as well, because we have an Agile community of practice across the university for the professional services mainly. And kind of what we've done and how that has helped to kind of improve our services. And while we were going through that journey, and I was also going through my diagnosis or initial kind of like, wait a minute, I think I'm neurodivergent, I was kind of noticing things like the stand-ups. We'd started stand-ups quite early on in the process, during COVID actually, where we were kind of trying to have that communication that we had in Advis, and we'd have a stand-up, but it was chaos. There were like 5 or 6 of us on our team, and there were 2 people that really liked to talk, and they would kind of commandeer the whole meeting. And several of us would kind of sit in the background going, and they go, "What have you done yesterday?" And we'd be like, "Not much, really." Well, not really. So we started kind of with some changes and COVID and stuff happening. We started trying to time box things and make sure that we had a set agenda of small items to talk about. And we found that really helped having a kind of structure to help us think, oh gosh, I really have to think about that. I have to think about same things that I did the previous day, what my plan is for today. Obviously, it's instant management, you never know what's going to happen. But so what I'm going to be doing today, obviously any blockers, because that's the big thing in like Scrum and Agile, so that our managers who acts as the product owner can unblock us from that and help us with issues that we've had. And we also, for well-being, we added kind of like one thing we're grateful for every day. We make sure we well, yeah. And it's a really good kind of telltale thing as well, because we get that whole, if somebody's having a bad day, you can normally tell, or they've had a bad day, because they find it really difficult to find something grateful for. And then it's really good to kind of record your successes, hazard stuff as well. So if we do it's
not really connected, but it does remind me, as a software vendor, we would often, at various positions with companies, often have meetings with many customers in customer groups. And we'd always take time to say, well, give us feedback on what you don't like in the product. And we find it to turn the room very negative, because everybody just turns up and, I think we should fix this and do this and have one of these. And why haven't you built one of these? And so I introduced a thing where you can tell us 3 things you'd like changed in the product, but you have to then tell us 1 thing which you love about the product. And what that meant is everybody heard all sorts of really positive things that they hadn't thought about. So by the end of it, it was a much more positive outcome of that. I realize that's a little bit of a divergence. Sorry.
No. I've actually also incorporated that into our post-incident reviews. Post-incident reviews we do on problem management, but we also make sure that we discuss it as we have kind of what went well during to ensure that we're thinking of it in a positive way. And also we kind of frame the kind of what went wrong as opportunities to improve.
Yes.
A positive way of addressing it, and it does make the meetings really positive.
I steal from a local school. When my kids were younger, they were always asked to describe WWW, which is what worked well, and EBI, or even better if. And I've discovered that works really well in the workplace. You can go into these situations and say, look, just tell me what worked well and what would have been even better if we hadn't done this. We're drawing it out without criticism. I love these little techniques. By the way, on the Agile front, on the software engineering development side of things, there's starting to be lots of talk around how Agile is struggling in a AI world, and many of the more waterfall concepts of a really good specification up front are becoming more important when AI is involved. And so there's lots of questioning around that, but whether that pans out wider, we shall see. But it's really interesting.
It is an interesting point. And I think at the university, we've really struggled with kind of development and stuff because it's traditionally very waterfall, very kind of long projects that last years and years and years. And we've really struggled with making those smaller and kind of chunking them and stuff. So I think there are certain people that I know that will be quite happy with that. Kind of move back towards a more. But
it's a mix and match of everything. You can take different methods and techniques and build them together into something fantastic, and that's definitely the right thing to do.
And in terms of the, just back to the capabilities, you're mentioning there about some of those techniques which, have changed the way that people work, and that sits nicely with the neurodivergent way of being. I mean, are there any things that really jar that maybe haven't been changed that you would still like to see change? Maybe from the industry as well, is there more that we could be seeing in the industry to move it in a slightly different direction?
Sure. Interesting question, really. I think, again, universities can be a lot different than other areas of the industry. Kind of trying to put people in the traditional boxes can be difficult, and that can happen whether you're agile, waterfall, whether you're old school IT or working in the ITSM, kind of adopt and adapt all the other practices as well. It's trying to put people in boxes that they're not going to quite fit, and working traditionally with traditional role with stuff, and realizing that with neurodiversity, so you may find that somebody's really good at one part of the job, but then struggle with the other part of the job. And it's okay to kind of split roles and go, that person can do that part of that job and somebody else can do that. And then they can swap with the other part, and trying to understand the differences and the nuances with that. I think maybe that's where a lot of areas struggle with, that whole kind of trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
And to be honest, I think that the way the industry is going is we are trying to get away from that as much about capability than, everything being nailed down. Although you could argue that it's never been meant to be like that, but that's the way that a lot of organizations have taken it on. Even when you talk about problem management, it's, as you know, it's a number of different types of activity, things pulled together. And that's not always obvious in the role sense from what you might get in the various textbooks. But I think it's still that question of, it always comes down to management, doesn't it, as to how they set the tone, how they understand their people, and how they make sure that they are getting the best out of them, and supporting them. And so that sort of knowing your people that you manage and doing that in a fair and equitable way is still a big challenge for me. Just rounding off the conversation, Faith, and it's really interesting stuff here, and get some insights. What's going to make the difference in the next 2, 3, 5 years in terms of further opening up understanding or awareness, or just helping people to be successful, both those that are neurodivergent and those that work with people that are neurodivergent? What one or two things do you think would still make a difference from your perspective?
I think it's very much still a conversation about awareness and understanding. I think there's some really, really positive things, and a lot of social media kind of areas are now a lot more focused on well-being, neurodivergency, and that sort of thing. And we can see a move towards that, which is helping understanding. I think the next generation that are coming through now, my children, I can see in them and stuff, you can see really, really good things coming through, and a lot more kind of the things that our generation and previous generations have kind of struggled with, the gender roles, the roles of how you behave in an office environment and that sort of thing. They're kind of challenging that as well. And we're seeing that a lot more. So I think there's a lot of positive movements towards that. There is the risks as well, the political risks that are going on at the moment, obviously. But there's also the risks of AI and the bias that we have recorded in data that exists at the moment. I'll tell you that perhaps the gender, there would be some war women type stuff where there is a lot of gender bias in AI, and also disability bias and race bias and that sort of thing that we're seeing that is being duplicated through AI, and making sure that that is considered when people, especially I think it's really, really important right now that a lot more people with neurodiversities, women, different races and ethnicities and that sort of thing, are getting much more involved in development of AI, because it's important to make sure that we're like removing those biases, because you can see that there is that risk that we could move towards a more biased example. And when you get in that kind of, I see it with my son, I've got a 16-year-old, and he will go straight to AI now instead of Google to ask questions. He actually go through the results himself and just believe what I read. And then you're like, no, always question it. Nothing.
Not with AI. Absolutely. You need to, that needs to be a much more important part of it. It's like having an assistant sitting next to you that gets things wrong quite a lot. That's great because I've got the answers, but you know that half the time they're wrong. So you double check. It's like having a junior member of the team that's full of confidence. That's great, but you always double check. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole discussion around these things and the removal of the bias, I mean, I think it's a really good point you make there about the development part, that, the tech industry, in terms of new stuff and the development of that, is really kind of tech blokey, white, middle-aged kind of guys, and it's not good enough. I mean, I think I saw something recently that a huge percentage of what's out there in the LLM world is the product of white middle class men, and that's not in any way good enough or reflective for what we need for it to really be effective. And you say there's lots of political things going on there, but I think that we've got much better at that whole, the concept of servant leadership, the whole concept of how we manage people. And it's not just, I mean, it is about being nice, of course, being kind and empathetic and so on, but it's also effective, and people should recognize that gets the best out of people. And so the best for the organization. It's just making sure that those strides forward that we've taken in the last 10, 15 years continue to go forward and it doesn't go backwards, which is part of it concern at the moment, I think.
I'm, of course, an optimist about these things. I think naturally we see it around us, although there's lots of little backlashes and lots of little examples where it's criticized or it's going the wrong way. But the general trend, it's like, solar power, the general trend is unstoppable. The general trend is, while we keep talking about these things, is always heading in the right direction, because when it comes down to it, we're all looking for the right thing to happen in the end. So we're a big optimist about it. We just have to keep talking and the right things will happen.
You might not think I'm an optimist, but actually, because again, I have, I do complain about things, but the comparison in terms of how people talk about those type of training, even 5-10 years ago, is like, diversity training, whereas now the way that people talk about it is different. It's still improved, but I think we have made some good strides with that.
There's always room for improvement. That's the good thing. We should always want it. Perfect is the enemy of good. No, is it the way around? Well, we should
perfection is the enemy.
True. What I say usually, but there is a good, But for me, it's people don't move forward when they're trying to get things perfect. And when you sometimes just keep moving, don't worry about perfection.
And all the things about how bad everything is, there's a lot of bad stuff at the moment, absolutely. But we are, if you look at it, look at the numbers over the last 20, 30, 50 years in terms of, health, a whole number of indicators that do continue to improve. Okay, that's a good place to round it up. Thank you, Faith, very much for that. It's been really insightful and helpful, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a brilliant conversation. Thank you very much, Faith. How do people get hold of you? How would they find you or contact you if they'd like to ask you something about this or pick up on any of the points you've made?
Yeah, so I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm quite busy on LinkedIn. I love the puzzle games that they've got, so I'm on there every day just doing them, to be honest. But yeah, I like to kind of get involved with other people's conversations on there as well. So if I see something that kind of resonates with me, I normally get involved and I do reply to messages and stuff in there as well. ITSMF as well, really, really good industry way of like learning about the industry and networking and that sort of thing. And for universities, UCISA, it's really, really good. The conversations that happen and the kind of the relationships that you can have with other universities. We're very good with working with each other and sharing our knowledge. And so, yeah, those are the best ways to get hold of me, really. LinkedIn mainly. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I completely support those organizations for different interactions that I've had over the years in the past. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I'll maybe get you on again in the future, see how things have developed and progressed in that. I'm sure that we'll run into you at one of those shows this year, whether it's SDI or ITSM or whatever. Or SITS even, we'll see you there. Thank you very much as ever. And we had some quite decent trivia today. There was nothing unpleasant or squeamish about it.
Shall we just finish with a traditional question to our guest? It's a really quick one. I know we
Go on.
traditionally, it's right at the end. Faith has had no warning of this. Faith, when you solve your next really difficult problem, would you like to be rewarded with a pot of honey or a bar of chocolate?
I'd probably go for the chocolate. I live very close to Cadbury's, so it'd probably be Cadbury.
Birmingham, of course. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Indeed. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Faith. Thank you. Really nice to have you on. Ian, we'll see you again next time. And thank you for listening to Enterprise Digital Podcast.